occasion, and today we are playing another campaign lore play. So yeah, we're going to talk more about the lore while campaigning, so should be fun. So yeah, I just realised actually, I haven't really spoken about the breakdown of the Empire, you know, how, well, not it breaking down, but you know, the different provinces and why that's a thing. So I think I'm going to do that. So I'm reading from the, I want to say, no, not 7th, 5th, 6th edition. I don't know, it never says the editions on these books, which I find really annoying. I keep having to look up the dates, but, you know, whatever. What are the Empire battle books, nonetheless? So yeah, I'm going to talk about some of the politics here. So reading from page 56, The Division of the Empire. So, though the Empire is often referred to as a single nation, this is not really the case. This great kingdom of men is not as unified as it would first appear to some. In fact, the Empire is a group of individual and independent states, joined together by ties of culture, language, and common interests. Today, in the time of Emperor Karl Franz, these states are of two kinds: city-states and provinces. Originally, only the provinces held political power, but over the years, larger cities have grown in importance and become self-governing. The provinces are based upon the ancient tribal homelands, whose people were ruled by their own chieftains, who became counts during the reign of Sigmar. Some of the provinces are now lost to war, hunger, or plague, while others have been renamed or changed their shape. So, of course, we spoke about Solund and the Drakwold provinces. Both of them gone. But you know, there's still some left, so that's good. And in addition, old rivalries and hatreds have caused many civil wars within the borders of the Empire, further fragmenting the land's unity. Thus, several provinces of old no longer exist. And, oh yeah, Sylvania is another one. The cursed province of Sylvania, for example, long haunted by the dread of vampire counts, was once of great importance, but it is now a backward rural area ruled by the Count of Stirland and shunned by all sane folk. So, of course, you know, Stirland, the elect Count Stirland claims Sylvania, but let's be honest, he doesn't really run it, or own it. It's very much, you know, the hands of the vampire counts. But, you know, no one's really going to argue with him, because no one wants it, because it's horrible. So if the Count of Stirland, you know, wants to say, nope, this is my land, then no one's going to stop him. But it's not really doing him much good. But anyway, this is now backward rural area, area ruled by the Count of Stirland and shunned by all sane folk. Solund is no more than memory now, for it never recovered from the destruction wrought by the orc warlord Gorbad Ironclaw. Marienburg was once part of the Empire, which we spoke about earlier in the series, but gained independence through a massive transfer of gold into the imperial coffers during the reign of Boris Goldgather. Any subsequent attempts to subdue Marienburg and bring it back within the rule of the Empire have failed, and today Marienburg remains a fiercely independent city, where the Count of Nordland, nominally the ruler of Marienburg, is forbidden to return under pain of death. So kind of annoying for you know, Nordland there. It's a bit rubbish, isn't it? But you know, he might get it back one day. I mean, it's mine now, but still, you know, he can keep hoping. And of course, we spoke about how, you know, it's run by different people. It's the elect counts, obviously. And so the counts are hereditary rulers whose families have long held the position of an imperial elector. Over the centuries, the title of count has passed from family to family as old dynasties withered away, intermarried, or perished in battle. With the death of the emperor, the counts gather to choose one of their own number as successor. Hence, in addition to being counts, they are also electors of the new emperor, and for this reason their full title is more properly elector counts. Though all counts of the empire are electors, there are others who have gained the right to vote through politics, bribery, and religious influence. The powerful cults of Sigmar and Ulrich, the old god of wolves and winter, can both cast their vote and influence which count will become the emperor. Curiously, even the elder of the Mootland, the leader of the halflings, has earned the right to vote in the election due to the halflings' contribution to imperial cuisine. However, the current elder of the Mootland, Hismi Stoutheart, is more interested in the timing of his next meal than political intrigues. So classic halflings there, love it. We're going to talk more about them fairly soon, I think. Actually, so that should be fun. I do like a good halfling, you know, they're good fun. So you'll notice in the campaign, I am, in this episode, definitely starting to do more defensive alliances and military alliances. Because although it's very risky, I've kind of decided I've got enough land now, and if I'm going to be Emperor, I need to get this proper alliances going between men and dwarves, you know? Because Franz, he's all about destroying chaos, right? He knows they're going to be coming back, and he wants to make sure they get dealt with. And for that, he's going to need all man and dwarf, to deal with this. So, and also, he is going to need to earn Ghal Maraz. So, of course, we're going to do the quest mission here. Although we only just got the Reichland Rune Fang, we'll be bringing that along and using that to help him claim Ghal Maraz. Although technically it's just his, and that should be fine. But he wanted to show that he's earned it, and what better way than a battle, the Battle of Blackfire Pass, which is actually one of the, I think it's the third Battle of Blackfire Pass. The first one, and most famous, was actually the Battle of Blackfire Pass that Sigmar fought. And, of course, Ghal Maraz was the weapon given to Sigmar by the dwarves, by Kurgan, King Kurgan. So, yeah, I think it's a great time, right?
To unite, for the orcs gather. Beyond the pass, a war boss draws to him all that is foul. An orc horde beyond imagining. As Sigmar fought, so shall we. We will become part of the legend. We will wipe the orcs from our door! And only when this is done, when our nation has healed, shall I take up Ghal Maraz! For Sigmar! For the Empire! For the Warhammer!
Oh my god, he just said Warhammer! That's the name of the thing we're playing! Isn't that exciting? So, yeah, so I didn't fully explain it, but basically, this is a very sort of momentous battle. The hammer. There's a lot of symbolic. There's a lot of symbolism here, because the fact is, the dwarves are helping us out here, just like they helped out Sigmar in the previous battle, 2,500 years ago. And yeah, so the idea that this is sort of repeating history, right? He's sort of following in Sigmar's footsteps. So having the right to wield, Sigmar's sort of, ancient, powerful weapon, this is a great time to earn it, because, he's repeating history. So he's really, following in Sigmar's footsteps, and so that's really important. So I think that's a very cool little touch, that this was the battle where he said, yes, I am an emperor, see, I did emperor things. This is what the first emperor did, and now I'm doing it, so give me my hammer. So I really like that. So for this next bit, I'm actually going to read, again, from the same army book as was before. But they have a whole section for the Hammer of Sigmar, which is basically the story of this battle that we're fighting right now. And you'll notice Total War, Creative Assembly did a great job of, basically having a lot of the enemy units show up, which are sort of relevant, which is really cool. So I'm probably going to have to do this very quickly, because there's quite a lot, and, these episodes aren't huge. So, Hammer of Sigmar. Dark, heavy clouds hung over the World's Edge Mountains, hiding the Blackfire Pass from sight and casting a gloomy grey light on the battlefield. The Empire forces had managed to find the Orc horde and bring it to battle in a narrow gorge where the Old Dwarf Road, descending from the pass, reached the rocky foothills. If the Orcs were not stopped here, they would swarm through the plains of Averland. Kurt Helborg, Reichsmarshal of the Empire, which, we mentioned in the first episode, and I'd like to think that he's here. Was observing the battlefield from a dominating crag, an expression of intense concern on his battle-scarred face. Can you see him? He asked the Master of the Engineers Guild. We don't have Master Engineers, that needs to be added. Who was searching the tempestuous skies with the help of his telescope. Yes, answered the engineer. He's heading back, but his griffin is flying in a rather peculiar fashion. I'm afraid it has been wounded. Soon it was possible to recognize the shape of the mighty Deathclaw. Unfortunately, I don't have him in this battle. Sorry, guys. And his rider, the Emperor Karl Franz himself. The griffin was obviously in bad condition, its flight painfully irregular. The two high officers of the Right Guard Knights, who were kept at the base of the crag in reserve, were momentarily ignoring the battle in the gorge below and following with apprehension that little dot in the sky. The knights were holding their breath, afraid of the safety of their lord, but the loyal beast, in spite of its serious wounds, eventually made it to the Right Guard. And I'm going to keep pausing it here to look at stuff. I'm not doing this live, this is me thinking ahead earlier, anyway. So he eventually made it to the Right Guard and was welcomed by a triumphant cry. Immediately, the Emperor was surrounded by his men. His first worry was to see that the griffin was taken straight back to Altdorf with one of the baggage wagons, and only then he accepted a flask of ale, mounted his warhorse, and spurned it towards the Reichsmarshal at the top of the crag. As Karl Franz dismounted, the two officers first asked him about his griffin. How bad is Deathclaw, sire? He will live, and I'm confident he will fly again, Karl Franz reassured them. Then he noticed the amused expression that was appearing on the Reichsmarshal's face when his old friend realized the Emperor was completely covered in green gore. What are you sneering at? Asked Karl Franz, smiling as he removed some of the slime from his own armour. I know that giants are not very bright, but I assure you that they have enough brains for a man to bathe in. At least this one had. Now, what's the situation on the field? Kurt Helborg turned serious again and replied, A stalemate, my lord. The orcs are trying to push their way out of the gorge, but our infantry is holding its ground. We are outnumbered at least 5 to 1, but as long as we keep them in the gorge, they cannot make their numbers count. Furthermore, they're so densely packed, they make a perfect target for our artillery, and the guns are causing tremendous casualties. But they are orcs. Those things do not fear death. They will keep coming on. Keep on coming, rather, murmured the Emperor. Then he added, Don't you think that their attack is quite unusual? Until now, we've seen lots of goblins and not so many units of orc warriors. Only that giant presented a major threat. Where are the best troops, I wonder? Perhaps up in the pass. Storming the dwarf fort, proposed Helborg. Maybe the dwarf garrison still resists. Let's hope so, Kurt, answered Karl Franz. I find it odd it keeps saying his full name here. Anyway. But please, warn your knights that I might be forced to ask them to fight dismounted if the situation gets worse. The rough terrain in the gorge is not suited to cavalry. They dislike fighting on foot, but they all swore to follow you to the far north if necessary. It shall be done as you command. Thank you, Kurt, nodded the Emperor, then turned his attention back to the battle. From this distance, it was possible to tell a great difference between the fighting styles of the two races. The Empire battle line resembled a breakwater of steel, which an immense green tide was trying to submerge. Yelling ferocious battle cries, thousands of goblins and orcs poured down the pass. Last mobs of savage warriors crashed on the disciplined ranks of the Imperial infantry. The attackers were always welcomed with a volley of handgun fire from the small detachments deployed between the main units of halberdiers and spearmen. The blaze and crackling noise of their shots accompanied the killing power of the bullets, and at times, especially with cowardly goblins, this was enough to disperse the savages. Orcs, on the other hand, were much more difficult to stop, and often their charges hit home. Then the men had to face some of the fiercest fighters in the old world. 1-to-1, a human soldier was no match for an orc warrior. Once again, the superior tactics of men compensated for their lack of individual strength. The closed ranks of spearmen and swordsmen were taking the brunt of the charges, and resisting long enough for halberd-armed detachments to hit the orcs in the flank, eventually routing them. The Empire artillery was dominating the battlefield. Its cannons destroyed the primitive stone throwers of the orcs with surgical precision, while the mortars and deadly volley guns of the engineering school opened huge gaps in the enemy ranks. Here there are blazing gout of fire. Here and there, a blazing gout of fire or a blinding lightning bolt was discharged against the enemy, marking the point where a wizard had won his duel with the green-skinned shamans, whose unreliable magic was often so dangerous to their comrades as it was to the Empire troops. Up to that moment, the battle had hung in the balance. The soldiers of the Empire had repelled many charges, but more and more enemies were appearing from the winding road descending from the pass. The orcs and the goblins seemed numberless, while each attack the ranks of men got thinner. The Empire had reserves, but they were often mostly made up of hurriedly conscripted militia. Mercenary crossbowmen could barely replace the handgunners, and the rough fighters of the free companies lacked the staying power of the perfectly trained state troops. The artillery too would eventually run out of ammunition, so the Empire's army's only hope was that the morale of the orcs would break. The same feral instincts that made orc armies so devastating could also cause them to collapse irreparably if they were confronted with sufficient resistance. The battle continued for hours and the orcs kept attacking fiercely. The Empire soldiers were tired, and their unbending discipline still held. After all, they knew they were fighting to save the lives of their families, and their Emperor was there, at their side. So they stubbornly kept on fighting, even when entire regiments were overwhelmed by the Green Horde. The men of the Empire held their position and fought on. Eventually the effects of their stern resolve started to show, as gradually the Greenskins' charges seemed to lose momentum. Those brutes looked less confident now, and they had to scale the grisly piles of green bodies that were obstructing most of the gorge to continue their attack. The Emperor, from his dominating position on the crag, had noticed a reduction in enemy pressure. He was considering the idea of dismounting his bodyguard and leading it into the fray to deliver the final blow to the orcs, when something terrible happened. A clamour arose from the northeast, where a new force appeared from a wood lying not far from the Emperor's left flank. Massive orcs mounted on brutal war boars were emerging from the cover of the trees and charging towards the panicking artillery. Worst of all, the boar riders were led by the hugest orc the Emperor had ever seen. The creature was a real monster, 8 feet tall, and was broadly built as a ferocious beast he was riding. Swinging a massive battle axe over his head and bellowing a roaring battle cry at the head of the charging boar riders, he was the incarnation of the bloodthirsty spirit of his race. Surely this was the warlord responsible for the creation of the War, a dire threat to the realms of men and the dwarves of the old world. So obviously I've finished the battle in the game, but I'm going to continue reading this, because honestly the next bit is a lot of diplomacy, When something particularly, you know, sort of poignant happens on the campaign, I'll be sure to point it out and what that means later. But this is a great story about getting Ghal Maraz. It's just a shame the battles last, such a brief amount of time in this game. But yeah, that's fine. Let's carry on. It's it's all good stuff. So the Orc cavalry ran down the artillery crews and smashed into the left flank of the Empire battle line. Entire regiments were caught while turning their formation to face the new threat and were easily routed and butchered. A few units broke rank and fled as panic started to spread through the Empire left flank. Nothing seemed able to stop the Orc warlord. At the same time, the mobs of goblins on the road to the front of the Empire lines were swept aside by fresh troops who rushed forward as soon as they detected the cavalry attack. Those goblins were not fast enough in getting out of the way, were ruthlessly trampled by the newcomers. These were the best Orc warriors, powerful veterans covered in scars, bigger and stronger than the average Orc. They formed an awesome fighting force. Besides them, small groups of monstrous trolls were pushed against the men, and one more giant appeared and joined the fray. "Sire," began the Reichsmarshal, a tone of despair in his voice. "I know, Kurt," Karl Franz interrupted him. "This explains why the Stirland contingent did not arrive. We underestimated the cunning of these barbaric warriors. It looks like our army has fallen into a colossal trap. Sire, there is only one thing left to do. You must return to Altdorf. I would only ask you give me a squadron of Reichsguard knights to engage the Boar Riders, so that we may buy some time for the rest of the army to retreat." Karl Franz looked puzzled at this proposal. He stood silent and turned to look in the direction of his capital. Yes, he could retreat to Altdorf, and from the safety of its walls raise another army. Then his eyes met the green fields of the Moot and the far horizon, and he considered what would be the fate of this merry land and all the people living in the eastern provinces of his empire if he followed Kurt's wise advice. A sardonic smile appeared for an instant on his lips, and when he turned towards the waiting Reichsmarshal, the decision was made. "No," said the Emperor firmly. "Not while I live." I know that's not very firm, but I like the idea of him being a bit, sort of nonchalant about the whole thing. So that's how I'm going to voice it. Kurt, you will return to Altdorf with a small squadron and organise the defences in case we fail. My place is here. We all know that without a leader, the Greenskins are nothing of a threat, and I think that there lies our last hope. I will personally confront the warlord, and only then will the battle be decided. But sire, with such a desperate plan, it would be rather... That was an order, Kurt. We have no time to waste. Recognising unflinching decision in the Emperor's eyes, Kurt Helborg gave in. He knew that there was nothing he could say to make the Emperor change his mind. He also realised that the chances were that they would never meet again in this life. But he was a soldier, one of the best. And as a soldier, he reacted. The old veteran stood to attention and answered, "Yes, sire, may Sigmar fight by your side." Then he left. Karl Franz mounted his black warhorse and addressed the master of the Engineers Guild, which we need Engineers Guild in this thing, right? We need friggin' Hockland long rifles and stuff. That is awesome. Do that, CA, right now. Thank you. Thanks for listening, CA. Anyway, Karl Franz mounted his black warhorse and addressed the master of the Engineers Guild. "Tell your men to concentrate their last rounds against that giant, and to abandon the guns when they run out of shots. There will be enough deaths today." Then he reached the stand of the Reichsguard, and under its inspiring colours he spoke to the knights. "Men, I'm going to lead you into a desperate charge. I won't lie to you. There are not enough of us to prevail against that immense horde of Boar Riders. We do, however, have a chance. You have all experienced that Orc armies dissolve like snow in the sun if their leader is killed, and this is our last hope of winning the battle. I want to confront their chieftain, and I need your help to reach him through his army. This is a sacrifice that I don't want to impose on any of you. Anybody who wants to leave with Kurt is free to do so. Your Reichsmarshal will need protection on the way to Altdorf. The ones who decide to stay must know that they are probably choosing death. But they must know that if we succeed, we will spend the rest of our life knowing that we have saved thousands of innocent lives. We will know that we are ready for the extreme sacrifice in the name of the Empire. If we die, we will die wielding our swords, and there is no better death for a warrior. We will all sit at Sigmar's banquet, like the heroes of old, and our names will be remembered in the songs of our people till the end of time. That sounds nice. In any case, we will become the stuff legends are made of. That I can promise you. So, who's with me? Question mark, exclamation mark. A murmur rose from the knights, and the banner bearer answered to the Emperor. My lord, I'm sure that I speak for all of us. We will all be there with you, up to the end. We have trained all of our life for this moment. We all swore to die protecting you, and the tradition of the Guard will not be stained by any of us walking away from danger and abandoning you. Reichsguard knights, your Emperor is calling. 500 swords were unsheathed and held high. With a single word, the knights renewed their oath of loyalty. Sigmar. Filled with pride, the Emperor turned his steed towards the Green Horde below, and raising the holy hammer of the Empire's patron god, he shouted, "Ride with me, men of the Empire! Charge!" So apparently he's got the hammer at this point, which makes it a bit different to the Grave Assembly one, but you know, that's fine. So, the Empire line was in tatters, only the right flank conserved some of its former order. Of the men's centre, the mere 2 regiments were left, the largest of the group of demented flagellants, 2 worried about the end of the world to run for their lives. Not far from them were the great swords of Averland, holding their ground in a desperate square to protect Marius Lightdorf, Elector Count of Averland, who is in this game. So that's cool. The two groups of men looked like small islands in a green sea, but their sacrifice was slowing down the enemy advance, giving time for the right flank to reorganise. Suddenly the Boar Riders were on them. The Orc Warlord drove his gigantic mount through the tall men, in heavy armour, tossing them aside like broken dolls, and this made way to the Count himself. Marius Lightdorf came forward to meet the monster, and dodging the charging beast, he swung his rune fang in a deadly arc. The massive boar was disemboweled by the magic sword, and its rider fell to the ground. For an instant the orcs hesitated, but immediately the warlord was on his feet again and leapt towards the Elector Count. The ensuing duel was over in a few seconds. The creature parried the runefang with his battle axe and let the Count stab him with a long poignard he was wielding in his left hand. The blade buried itself in the thick skin and muscles of the creature, which ignored the wound altogether and grasped the neck of the Count in its powerful left claw. After a few seconds of struggle, the man's strangled snarl was cut short by a chilling noise of bones snapping, and the body of Marius Lightdorf relaxed in the grip of the orc, lifeless. Damn! Damn, orc, you scary. So, the Orc Warlord turned around to contemplate his victory. The Humies were defeated, the pitiful remains of their army would soon be crushed. There they were, still fighting off his boys, but the sight of their boss dead at his hand should now break their spirit, he thought. Unexpectedly, the Humie line rang with cries of hope, and a new energy seemed to fill them. All eyes were looking west. The Warlord could not understand what was happening, but then he perceived a tremor on the ground, and heard the blast of a horn mixed with the screams of panic from the gobos behind his boar boys. Eventually, he caught sight of the enemy knights as they charged through his troops, running down the gobos as they fled, and then crashing into the boar boys. At first, the Humies seemed to prevail, their charge penetrating deep within the mob of the boar riders, slaying dozens of the ferocious warriors. But the boys were too many, and no matter how many were killed in the first few moments, the Humies' charge eventually exhausted its impetus. The Humie knights rallied around their banner, their lances broken, their steeds wounded and spent. At that point, the Orc Warlord saw their leader and realised that the one he had killed was not the boss of the Humies. The Orc recognised the weapon that the enemy leader was wielding with such an implacable power. Skull Splitter. That warhammer had been the bane of his race since the dawn of times, according to the shaman's tales. If the mounted Humie boss had the hammer, he must be the warlord of all men, the one they called Emperor. The Orc was filled with pride. He would kill that Emperor and take his hammer. All the Humies would then surrender to him and more. Orcs would join his war. After that, he would butcher the bearded stunties, and he would become the greatest warlord ever to walk under Gork's sky. So, you know, he's aspirational, which I like that. You know, he's not with ambition. The Emperor of the Humies had seen him too and started to move towards him, smashing his way through the Boar Riders. The Warlord could not wait for that fight and ordered his bodyguard of huge mounted bosses to stop the other knights, but to let the big Humie with the hammer come to him. His bodyguards, who had almost finished crushing the last greatswords, grunted affirmatively and charged in. So I've got to quickly interrupt. It happened, you know, while I was talking. But I was in the flow, so I wanted to carry on. But yeah, here, well, not right here, but in the campaign, at any rate. So I've decided to become allies with Stirland, because I figured that would lead me to some cool, you know, vampire wars. And it did, almost immediately, which is great. So I will be talking about Stirland in the next episode, as well as the Moot, slightly separately, and then I'm going to have to talk about vampires, probably. It's going to be a very busy couple of episodes, next couple. So I should probably crack on with the rest of the story of Ghal Maraz then, shouldn't I? Well, Battle of Blackfire Pass at any rate. So here I go. Karl Franz spurred his horse towards the Orc Warlord. His arm was tired, he couldn't remember how many boar riders he had dispatched with the mighty warhammer, and now he could see that that one more mob of them was coming towards him in his right guard. These ones were impressive creatures, even bigger than normal boar riders, and better armed and armoured. There were more of them than he had knights left. The situation was grim. Well, he would make sure that they paid a high price for his life. Sigmar and the Emperor, sorry, and the Empire, he shouted. He wouldn't shout Emperor, would he? He's the Emperor. That'd be really, egotistical. Anyway, he shouted, closing his visor and spurring his charger towards the incoming orcs. The knights and the orc bodyguard clashed in a thundering clamour of steel against steel, but something strange happened around Karl Franz. The boar riders opened up in front of him and let him through, concentrating their attacks on the right guard. The Emperor stopped his horse and was about to turn it when he saw the orc warlord standing straight ahead of him, on the body of Marius Leitdorf. The monster raised its axe in a clear challenge directed at him. The Emperor understood, rode towards the warlord and then dismounted, readying himself for the final confrontation. The two opponents studied each other for a few seconds, while all around them the battle seemed to stop. An unnatural silence fell on the battlefield. All eyes turned towards the two champions. Everybody, orc and man, knew that this was the fatal moment when the battle would be decided. The two opponents were magnificent warriors, each of them representing the epitome of their race's fighting prowess. The Emperor was a tall, muscular man, clad in his black, full armour. It should be black in the game, really. It's always mentioned that it's black. It's not black in this. It's just... Anyway. He had removed his helm, knowing the importance of eye contact in single combat. On his chest, the silver seal was shining like a star, and the runes inscribed on Ghal Maraz, the mighty hammer of Sigmar, were burning bright. His opponent was towering over him, a mountain of green muscles. The steam of its breath made Karl Franz think of a savage beast ready to charge. The bits of armour strapped onto that immense body seemed more like a decoration than real protection for its rock-hard flesh. The heavy axe in its hands was as tall as a man. Karl Franz noticed the crackling green energies playing around the edge of the blade and realised that he would not have to deal only with muscular power. Detecting that the attention of the Emperor focused for an instant on the axe, the vicious orc seized the occasion to sprung towards the man. My bad. It moved at a speed unthinkable for such a huge creature, and its bellowing battle cry was in itself an assault on the man's fighting spirit. The instincts developed in years of training in the best fencing schools and the experience built on dozens of battlefields saved the Emperor. His shield arm rose just in time to stop the axe swinging towards his neck. The impact was terrible. The axe cut right into the shield bearing the insignia of the Emperor, destroying it. But the blade was stopped by the Emperor's armour, the silver seal countering the energies that would have allowed that fearsome axe to sever his arm. Karl Franz ignored the pain and struck back with Ghal Maraz. The hammer hit the orc on the shoulder, and the savage warrior screamed its pain to the sky. That gave the Emperor time to recover and regain the distance he wanted to keep from his opponent. He didn't want the orc to get too close. He knew if that monster grabbed him, that would spell his doom. The wound seemed to eliminate any trace of rational thought from the orc. It reverted to his most basic instinct and charged him with even stronger ferocity. The series of blows that followed were parried, dodged, and returned by the two opponents, in a duel that often got too fast for the troops around to clearly follow. After a few long minutes, it became clear to Karl Franz that he was slowly losing. His body felt numb, and there was where some of the orc blows had reached him. He could feel his own blood flowing in the leggings of his armour. His strength was waning, while his monstrous opponent kept attacking relentlessly. Finally, the Emperor began giving ground and eventually fell to one knee. At that sight, a cry of pain came from the Empire troops. The Orc warlord, foretasting victory, prepared for the last strike. Karl Franz was overwhelmed by pain. He understood that he was losing the duel because his race had lost that bloodlust, that same savage spirit that filled his opponent with strength. Civilization had brought many advantages on mankind, but men nowadays relied more and more on black powder and other technological means to fight for them, and the warrior spirit of their barbaric ancestors was not as strong as it used to be. If only he could have the same strength as Holy Sigmar of old, who vanquished this very same enemy millennia ago in this same mountain pass. If only he could regain that spirit to save his subjects and protect his land. His silent prayer was sincere and was not ignored. Karl Franz did not know where the new energy came from. Was it the hammer he was holding in his hand? Or was it from within the recesses of his own soul? He could not tell. All of a sudden the pain was gone. His muscles flexed with unearthly strength, and the primal fighting spirit filled his heart. The Emperor rose once more to meet the orc. The warlord stopped. He could not believe what he was seeing. He had been fighting a man in armour. So why was the figure standing before him that of a gigantic warrior dressed in furs? He was not the same person. This was taller, more powerful, but the hammer he raised in the air was the very same legendary weapon. The man shouted a loud battle cry that boomed among the mountains, as it had done so many centuries before. Unburigen! And just say that's the clan that Sigmar was the chieftain of, in the Unburigens. You know, now the Reichland people. Anyway. At that sound, the instincts of the warlord were overcome by memories inscribed in the soul of his race. Memories of mighty barbarians defeating the orcs in the war for the domination of the rich plains and driving them to the desolation beyond the mountains. In those times, men were led by this very same champion. He who had denied the possession of this land to the green-skinned race. If the orc warlord could have known such an emotion, this was in the moment he would have felt fear. Instead, his reaction was rather one of hesitation, a split second of hesitation that was to cost him everything. Ghal Maraz struck home on the orc's forehead with a thunderous crack. The green giant fell, life quickly abandoning his crushed skull. The orc stared through his own blood at the enemy that had vanquished him. Once again he was seeing the wounded man in the black armour, and not the godlike barbarian warrior. The orc could not understand the power that defeated him, and raised a claw in a last attempt to fight back, but all his strength had gone, and his arm fell back, powerless. Then he saw no more. The battle was over, their leader defeated. The orcs scattered and kept fleeing until they were back on their bleak territories. The men, too tired to pursue, took care of the wounded, starting with their glorious emperor. From that day on, the name of Karl Franz has been pronounced in the Empire with even greater pride, for all heard tales of that duel, and even though in years to come the stories about the battle were embellished and exaggerated, everyone always agrees that on that day Sigmar himself had fought alongside his warriors. And that gets us right to the end. In fact, it's going to end in about 3, 2, 1. So, yeah, I've run out of VT just in time. So, anyway, as you saw, we're gonna help out the moot in the next one. I'm gonna fight that battle because I want to see the custom map that's used for it, because I do have that mod running with all the great custom maps, and I want to see if the moot's got one. And also, it's the moot. It's worth defending. Okay, it's full of great pies, and an elect account lives there. I mean, not a real elect account, but he's got a vote. So you know, I'm gonna look after him. So, yeah, so we'll be talking about Stirland and the Moot and probably vampires and a lot of things in the next episode. But, you know, we've covered Ghal Maraz and, you know, the Battle of Blackfire Pass and stuff. Didn't really talk much about Ghal Maraz, actually. But, you know, it's a dwarf weapon that was given to Sigmar. If you listen to episode, I want to say 5.5, 6. I don't know, whichever one it was. So, as always, if you liked this video, give it a comment, a like and a subscribe, and that would be absolutely amazing. Everyone who's subscribed so far, thank you so much. It's really reassuring that, you know, people enjoy watching this stuff. So yeah, please keep on doing that. It's really good, and tell your friends. So guys, I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys.